Miss Mandisa Thomas is well known to us. This is her third time presenting to HFFC. She's founder and president of Black Nonbelievers, Inc., based in Atlanta with chapters in 14 major cities in 12 states and Washington, D.C. She has appeared on CNN, CBS Sunday Morning, Playboy, and maintains an active national speaking schedule. She currently serves on the board for American Atheists and previously for Foundation Beyond Belief. In 2019, she was named Freedom from Religion Foundation's Free Thought Heroine. In 2021, she will be celebrating BNI's 10th anniversary. Congratulations.
I'm just going to give a bit of background on myself so that you kind of understand where I'm coming from. I am from New York City. My background was that I wasn't raised in a religious home. I was actually raised in the projects. I am a product of the Black community, and I'm also a product of the Black conscious community, which was very much rooted in the empowerment of Black folks, pride in being Black, especially trying to undo that very, very white-centered perspective on intelligence and looks. I wasn't indoctrinated into religion, and so I noticed early on about how the Black community clung to religion and the church, and that bothered me. Like it bothers a lot of other Black folks. Because I am a practitioner in this movement, I'm speaking from my experience and my expertise, and as someone who is trying to lend my work in building up this demographic of Black folks who have not only questioned those beliefs, but have also left, and who also needed to know that there are more out there like us. So this is called walking the talk. Often we are asked about how to be more effectively diverse and inclusive within our communities. I know that there are a lot of good atheists and humanists who have good hearts and who do good works, but because of those institutional factors of racism and white supremacy, that there are some best practices and some things that we need to unlearn and start doing better. And there's just no getting around that. So I'm going to be speaking from that perspective here. I'm going to show, for those of you who did not know that on a national level, these organizations exist, well, now you do. Also, I will say that I also serve on the board for the American Humanist Association, in addition to American Atheists, because people need to know what the secular community, and this is just a small view of what we look like. It is made up of atheists, humanists, secularists, skeptics. We also have varied areas of focus. It is okay to have more than one. So when it comes to building up community, it is something that we're doing. And I will say that even within the Black community, it must be understood that there has always been resistance, there has always been creativity, there's always been intelligence. Even though that isn't reflected in the wider mainstream, those of us who were sufficiently raised within our communities know this. But of course, when we're dealing with a secular community, the fact that much of this information is still unknown, we have to take this into consideration. This is just a small view of what the secular community looks like, and you can see the varied organizations. So I do also want to give the definitions of community, because many of us are involved not just within the secular community, but also other communities as well. So it's a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes and goals. Also a similarity or identity or identities, because there are more than one and they may be interchangeable. This is very important though, joint ownership or liability, which means that we own our actions, we own our responsibilities, because guess what? As a non-religious community, we are now responsible for what we do and how we do it. Some of the problems within the secular community, and going to just expand on some of them. Most of your atheist, secular, humanist groups are still predominantly white. And not only that, they also have a lot of Eurocentric imagery and elitist ideals. Humanists trying to dictate and critique these other communities, that is certainly one of them, because they may not take into account the economic factors, the institutional factors of racial injustice, and also other things that affect marginalized communities and have done so historically. Also, diversity and inclusion efforts tends to be one time, or maybe once a year, or maybe sporadically. That's not how this changes. There's also a huge focus on the issues, but not the people. And I'm going back to before I became a full-time activist within the secular community. I was a hospitality professional for about 20 years. And I will tell you that a huge aspect is how you talk to people and how people are treated. I will say that that is something that is still very much lost on many of us in our community. That does tend to happen maybe subconsciously about how people of color are treated. There's also lots of talk about these efforts. We see a lot of white folks screaming Black Lives Matter and speaking to issues about race and racial injustice, but very little focus on the root issues and also about changing them. There also seems to be a tendency to only look at those who have certain academic credentials. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but those who are actual practitioners and organizers within the community do tend to be overlooked. And sadly, that tends to be a lot of women who are overlooked, because anyone can tell you that it is a lot of women who are doing a lot of the grunt work, especially within the Black community and the Black church. Rarely do we receive the credit and the acknowledgement that we deserve. So when we talk about welcoming spaces, because we want to develop those spaces for people to land, and who are those who are leaving religion, and also those who may be recovering from religious trauma. And I would like to give a shout out to the organization Recovering from Religion. I'm very, very proud to be a part of that organization, because it also focuses on community building and support for those who are leaving. When we think of welcoming spaces in our organizations, they should be friendly. If you yourself, as a leader or an organizer in this community, if you don't think that you can be that welcoming person, it's good to kind of learn how to be, or to designate someone who you know can be. Also very supportive. Again, this goes back to letting people know that we are here for them and that we support them, especially when they're having those doubts. It is okay for them to feel vulnerable. You're not just challenging them, especially when they may be feeling somewhat fragile, because we have a lot of people coming out of religion who feel that. And it's important for us to make sure that we are being mindful. They should also be affirming and encouraging. We give too much power to the religious community as being the only affirming and supportive spaces. As humanists, you don't need to believe in a God to do that, right? You absolutely do not need to have this divine entity to encourage you on how to be good. And I would argue that those who do believe in such a God aren't necessarily good at all, right? We can definitely attest to that. If we are going to be leading the charge on this, then our spaces definitely need to be affirming and encouraging, especially to those who are leaving, but also to those who are questioning and just going through everyday life, because we all still experience that. They should definitely be informative, definitely resourceful, and also consistent. Consistency and establishing new tradition. And I know that some have issues with the word ritual, but it involves consistency and doing things more than once. Sometimes it may feel like it's repetitive, but guess what? This is how we drive the message home, and that we're showing that we are a community of caring and educated and intelligent folks by how we stick to doing these things. And so I like for you to ask yourselves, and this is for everyone here. It isn't just for the white people on this call. I also challenge those of my fellow Black atheists and secularists and humanists and those who still identify as of color, because again, I say that that's sort of interchangeable and it takes time to reconsider those factors. Ask yourselves about your efforts to diversify your organizations, or even ask yourselves about your efforts to lend your, to lend your skills or expertise. What are some of the challenges that you have encountered? Have you had any successes? And if you have not tried any, why do you think that is? And also ask yourself, how important is it to you to be inclusive and to support diversity efforts? And I need for some of you to be honest about that. I think the worst thing we can do as a community is act like these things are important to us and they really aren't. It doesn't mean that you have to absolutely be so loud and boisterous about how you don't care about it. But if you incorporate the principles of humanism, hopefully they are important to you, and also applying them is important to you as well. So these are some of the things that we should be thinking about and that you should be asking yourself. There is an onus on those of you, especially who are leading organizations, and you're wondering why you're still only attracting a certain demographic. These may be tough questions to ask, but guess what? That's okay. Now, I want to say that there are I's in diversity, but it's all about we. Now, for those of you who may be wondering, where are all the Black atheists? Where are all the Black humanists? Now, you may see them in spots in your respective groups or at certain events. And certainly, Black Nonbelievers is not the only one that's focused on it, but I will tell you that we've been doing a damn good job in helping develop it. Because again, this is our focus. We weren't going to wait on the overall community to increase their efforts, but it was about how we help each other in the meantime. So also, diversity isn't just about who we are, it's also about what we do. If you've been tuned in to Black Nonbelievers either since the beginning or even over the past few years, you know that we do a number of things. We are diverse in what we do. This is our Charlotte affiliate. This is them volunteering with the Atheists Helping the Homeless. Some of our pictures are from the various events that we've done, including Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference. It makes a difference. It makes a difference who is leading the charge on certain efforts. Guess what? If you haven't already visited, shout out to John Levin, who's wearing his BN shirt. For those of you who didn't think that you could support our organization, look here and you'd see that you would be wrong. So I'd like for you to consider that during this presentation. It's an exclusive to Black Nonbelievers. Any of the organizations can do it, but you have to be willing to do it. Again, it's about the practical application and actually doing it. So here are some best practices for those of you who really want to step up your diversity and inclusion efforts. So it's about meeting people where they are. It's about not expecting that everyone will just come to you. You may have to go to them. And here's a point of note. If you are supporting communities of color, we are not so blindsided by the help that we don't know when things seem patronizing, where people may say, well, I'm just helping you people because look at you, you seem so destitute. It's almost like the simplified question of why do so many Black folk still religious? So check your privilege there. And again, that has nothing to do with economics, but that privilege comes when you may be looking at a certain community or demographic in a way that may be demeaning and you may not even realize that you're doing it. This is a part of what we're doing here. And so a huge part of that also is listening. We don't always have to talk. We love to talk as a community, but many times we're talking at people and not to them. It is good to listen. You don't always need to be Speaking. It's good to listen to people and their experiences, also where we're coming from in our walks. Do ask thoughtful questions. Be sincere and authentic. Trust me, we can tell when people aren't, but again, also being consistent. Also, do collaborate with other organizations and various initiatives. I see that HFFC has shown how they've collaborated. You can also create a task force focused on diversity. Hopefully you are including Black folks in it, and also other non-white demographics. Also develop diverse and inclusive materials. It does make a difference who is represented in your literature. Also be open to changing your messaging. Again, we are a community that prides itself on our ability to educate and also learn. That means incorporating change when it's necessary. You can also offer targeted outreach. It is okay to reach out to certain demographics, but again, it is important that you are not just doing so from this very Eurocentric lens. Also, you can provide bilingual versions of information, and I do highly recommend collaborating with those secular organizations that focus on certain demographics. It is okay to be bilingual in your approach and in your messaging. Last but not least, do support the organizations and initiatives that are doing racial justice work. Again, you don't have to be at the forefront. Being a part of community means knowing when to lead, but then also knowing when to play supportive roles. In conclusion, I would like for everyone to identify at least 3 things that you can do to make your groups more diverse and inclusive, and try them. Don't just identify them. Make sure you try them. Make sure you follow up. If they don't work, you can try something different. We are in a community now where there isn't just a linear way of thinking. Incorporating multiple and various ways of doing things, and we're not going to always get them right. There will be mistakes that are made, but we shouldn't be going into this with the mindset that, well, it's just going to be wrong. And also not coming into it with a defensive mindset, especially when people of color or other Black folks or other marginalized communities, non-white folks, are actually speaking on it. Because this is how we change. This change is going to be uncomfortable for a lot of folks. Learning is a lifelong process. Once we continue to keep that in mind, I think that can change the trajectory of how we move and how we work in this community. There is a lot of good that we are doing as a community, but are there improvements that need to be made? Absolutely there are, and this is what we're here to work on. This is a start. So thank you all very much. I appreciate you listening.